Welcome to the Bet On Me podcast, the ultimate resource for softball players looking to take control of their training and reach their full potential. I'm your host, Krista Stoker, and on this show, we'll be discussing everything from taking a holistic approach to your training to data-driven strategies for maximizing and growing yourself not only on the field, but off. At S2 Breakthrough, we believe that athletes should lead their own journey and push past any perceived ceilings on their talent. So join us as we explore the world of softball player development and help you bet on yourself. Because when you bet on yourself, you can't lose. All right, I'm so excited today here with Coach C from Penn State. We've been working with their staff for a couple years now. This is our second year working with them, and just a lot of great stuff happening there with player development. Obviously, there's been some good results in the fields and sort of transforming that team. So excited to dive in here. Maybe, Coach, if you could just tell the listeners a little bit about how you got to where you are. Obviously, you've been coaching a while, and sort of maybe just how you ended up where you are today.
Okay, yes. Well, first off, I appreciate you having me. And for all the listeners out there, I'm a huge S2 fan. So thankful for this opportunity to speak with Krista today. As far as my journey, I've been coaching now. This is actually year 20 for me. I've been at Penn State for 3 years. Prior to that, I was at Miami of Ohio for 8 years as a head coach. Before that, 6 years at Oklahoma State as an assistant. I was at Syracuse before that, started coaching at Ohio University, and I played at Virginia Tech. So I've been very blessed in my softball journey to be a part of a lot of great programs and a lot of different cultures. And I'm originally from Hawaii, but my dad was in the military and got stationed in the DC area. So for the most part, I grew up out on the East Coast. So for me, when Penn State came up, personally, it was a great fit, and professionally, you couldn't ask for a better opportunity. So just thankful to have the opportunity to be at Penn State.
Yeah, that's awesome. We have, I will say, we were laughing or kind of telling you this a little bit before, but Ashley works closest with you.
Yes.
We definitely, there's a lot of raving about what you've done in the S2 office, just in your ability to incorporate player development and really bring your full staff into that. And so maybe let's just start with, what has that player development journey looked like for you? Obviously, things have been evolving a lot in the softball space the past few years, but what are some key things that you've really felt like are impactful in incorporating into your sort of journey with your athletes, and just maybe talk generally about player development and what it's looked like for you, especially the past few years?
Yeah, essential part of our program here at Penn State, simply put. I've always been a fan of player development and I just think being able to see what players are doing objectively, I've always been a proponent for it. It looked a little different in years past, and I agree with you, Krista, in that we're fortunate that our sport is finally kind of going toward that direction of, hey, what we used to do as players or how we used to coach our teams back in the day. Although there's still a little bit of that, we at Penn State, what we do, the data and the objective measurements to be able to monitor our players' progress in all aspects, it's a cornerstone of our program. So my journey with you all, when I first got to Penn State, Coach Jeff Tilka came with me. He's currently my assistant, and he does a phenomenal job, but he worked at hitting facility up in Elite. And he was familiar with you all. So he said, hey, see, I think you really need to talk to S2 about what they can do, from a development standpoint. And so first year at Penn State was COVID. So obviously we didn't recruit, but that summer, I remember I went up to Chicago. I was recruiting at DeMarini. And I trust what Coach Tilka says 100%. So I went to the facility and I came and I met with you all and met with Ashley and saw some of the things you were doing. And I said, you know what, this is something that I want to be a part of. So for us, that's kind of how it all started. And, what Ashley has been able to do for us from a development standpoint has been huge, and I think just for me, I think it's kind of ongoing professional development for me because she really helps me to be a better coach. So In short, I've always believed in player development, but now, I'm fortunate to be at Penn State where I have the resources to be able to expand on that. So what we did year one was, for me, the more hands on deck with my student athletes, the better, right? So my strength coach is Adam Game, and he was actually with me at Miami of Ohio. And, we were doing some things there. So I basically said, hey, coach, I need you to sit in on these meetings with Ashley, brought in my athletic trainer. And now I call them my sport performance staff, which
Yeah.
which is Ashley, my strength coach, and my athletic trainer. And we were able to basically integrate a lot of the things that I learned from you all into our everyday training. But it really has taken all of us to be a part of what we're doing now at Penn State. And I feel really good about a lot of things that we've got going on within our program. And that would probably be another podcast to talk through.
Yeah.
In short, I think it's so important. I think player development is essential. And last year, I get asked this question a lot. We had the biggest turnaround in Division I softball last year, and I was just asked that question on the last call.
Yeah.
What was the reason? And there were two things: our culture was stronger, and player development. Because when you look at every aspect of the growth of our team, from hitting to defense to pitching, we improved in all areas. And I do think it's because we're firm believers at Penn State in the development piece.
Yeah, for sure.
So I work with you all from a pitching standpoint. I'm fortunate to have Coach Stoker, who is an expert in a lot of different things, so he's kind of my expert with the offense, coachmanship. But yeah, all in all, just great stuff here. And I feel like we're doing a lot of cool things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember when you first stopped by, because if you want to know about the authentic nature of us, and you want to see Ashley in her element, I was like, called her from the fields. It was like, Coach C from Penn State stopping by, and we were super busy that day. And I remember someone saying that at one point Ashley was like, keep up, because she was also coaching, and you were like chasing her around. I was like, Ashley, maybe just we're a coach is coming over, but that's how it flows at S2. You gotta keep up, otherwise you gotta kind of chase us around. So I had a question as you were talking about that I think comes up a lot, especially in college, because it seems more limited. The athletes are older. They maybe feel like they've already had success up to that point. Obviously they got to the stage they're on. So what has the process been like in incorporating not just necessarily the stuff that we do with you, but also the stuff that Coach Tilka's doing, and the different player development aspects and the data? How has the receptiveness of the athletes been in that process? And is there anything, special that you feel like is sort of important in getting that buy-in from the athletes as you're incorporating some of this, development mindset, data mindset, that type of thing?
Right. I think you just have to know each individual athlete and know how much information they need from a tech standpoint. We've got our senior, one of our catchers, who's a mechanical engineer major, and she wants all the data that you can give her. I will say Bailey Partial, our pitcher, our fifth year pitcher, she's pretty similar in that she likes data. She loves tech days when we're training off of Yacker Tech and Rapsodo. But, my other pitchers aren't necessarily, they don't need that kind of information. And same thing for the hitters. So we kind of pick and choose what information we provide for each individual athlete. But I do think what's important is the development piece and the data. What it does is it helps my staff, it guides our practice planning.
Right.
So for instance, when I look at the data, and we also do wellness surveys with our team. And so for instance, practically speaking, if I look at our wellness survey for the week and my pitchers are sore and fatigued, it's not that I'm going to go to them and say, hey, the wellness survey said this, right? It's more of, I'm going to use that information to help guide the next practice structure. So Maybe
Right.
it's, hey, they actually need a day off from training, right? And maybe we go to an extra mobility day. So
Right.
I think in so many aspects, or from a pitching standpoint, let's say I look at it and the velo's down a little bit. I'm going to have to, as a coach, try to figure out what's the reason for that and how to get the velo back up. Or so there's so many different ways in which we use the data. I think our staff does a really good job too of keeping track of progress over time. Our athletes get tested a lot. So, where were we last fall versus where are our testing numbers this fall? Because you have to understand where an athlete is to see where
Right.
we can get them to, so that's also kind of a big part. It's the timing of how much you're testing to make sure that your kids are, making sure that your kids are developing in all aspects. So,
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good sort of summary of things. I think something that gets overlooked when we talk about player development is there's an idea that it's like, I don't know, people fixate on one number. Like we're all data driven training looks like is we're chasing velo or something. And I think all of those inputs that you just described are very similar to how we see it as too, which is data is wellness questionnaires, data is individualization, understanding how each athlete learns. There's a lot that goes into that. And the more sometimes it can feel overwhelming as a coach, but the more that you can really see that impact on athletes. And I think that's how that's really important. I think that goes to too, why the integration of staffs is so important. Because,
sure.
Some of those things that you're mentioning, I see velo down or there's heavy fatigue numbers. When you aren't integrated with your staff and you can't go to your strength coach or your AT and say, here are some trends we're seeing, that gets really tough and isolating, I think. And I felt that as a skill coach where I was like, my athletes aren't, hinging well, and I'm not a strength coach. So how am I supposed to do that in the cage, or am I supposed to get them involved? So I think that's why that's so impactful, to feel that integration. I'm sure that your athletes feel that as well. What are some of the biggest overlap, maybe changes? Like, are there improvements in that integration that you felt from last year to this year, or from previous years to this year? Are there any sort of big things that you feel like you guys have done better as a staff to integrate or incorporate into player development this year?
Yeah. So first off, to go back to your point, I don't know how coaches don't work. I think you have to work with your strength coach and your athletic trainer. I mean, those two, what they do for me, it's huge. Like I can't do my job at the best of my ability without having those two 100% bought into the development piece. So, I think for me, I've got to give them so much credit, Coach Adam Gaiman and Angel Lazu, because they are bought in 100% and fully invested in everything that our student athletes do. So I think it's if you have an athletic trainer and you have a strength coach, I think it's so important. If you can use outside resources like you all, I'll give you another example of how you guys have helped make us better. So the mobility piece. So when you all come down, you test our pitchers' mobility. What we saw is that, hey, thoracic rotation and lat mobility is not great. So we've actually now integrated into our own system once a month. And actually their testing is this week, but now we have our own mobility testing. I don't think we would have done that had we not had that idea from you all. Like, man, this is important. We need to start doing something.
Right.
But year one, it was just a crazy year. So we really didn't do anything from a process development. We were keeping track of certain things, but not as much as last year. But so basically last year, what we did was we started working with you all. And the other big thing we did was we literally started keeping track of pitch counts and pitchers' workload every practice. So every time my student athletes or my pitchers pick up a ball, everything that they do has been documented. And, another big reason for our success last year was we were healthy.
Right.
The previous year, we were not very healthy. And I had to come up with I've got to make sure that we can stay on the field. So, And I do think that system that we came up with, I mean, we talk every week about workload and what's a high day, medium day, what's it look like. So now we had all that data from last year, which we found was pretty successful. And unfortunately, we didn't go as deep into the postseason as we would have liked to, but Bailey had the 17th most thrown innings in the country.
Right.
So she threw a lot. And honestly, she was just, in my opinion, just as strong at the end of last year as she was at the beginning, and there was never really any fluctuations in where she was at from a conditioning standpoint.
Right.
And I do think it's because we were so diligent about workload, rest, recovery, and all of it. So this year we actually had the system implemented. So we looked at numbers from last year, and I mean, we've got our August ramp up now. We've got our workload planned out from August 1st until the start of season,
Yeah.
which gives us a map from programming. So that's probably been one of the biggest things that I think that we've done from an overall standpoint. But getting on calls with Ashley and sending her, now we have Yakritech, right? The Yakritech
Right.
and the using Rapsodo data, and Ashley kind of helps me from the standpoint of, this is what the ball flight says, and here are some things that I think that your athletes can develop and continue to improve on. So that's also been such a big part, because it helps me when I structure workouts for my kids, right? So Vanessa can work on this, Lydia, they're all on different things as far as what they're actually working on in practice. Sorry, that was a lot. I love talking.
No, it was great. No, it was so good. I think it's really important. I think it's, again, like things that people are missing about the importance of development. It's like workload. If I had to answer the number one thing that Ashley talks to college coaches about, it's workload. And it's because you guys are getting hurt staffs, right? And it's why we talk about it so much, is because workload is not managed before they get to you a lot. And it's not a conversation that we're having enough to make sure that they're coming to college healthy. Yep. And then when they get to college, it's like, I think we have traditionally said that we don't have enough time to develop, but some of that is because we're managing injuries, and then we need the off season to recover. And if you're doing it right, you've got 5 straight years of development that you could really work if you're thinking about it in the way that you just described, which is we ramp up, we build into the season, and then we restart in the summer. And when done correctly, the athletes don't need off time. It looks different, but they don't need to be shut down, right? And I think just traditionally we've felt like we have to shut people down a lot because we haven't managed workload and we haven't understood that concept. And so I think that that's really, really powerful. It's something we talked about a lot with your staff, is like your ability to essentially use 2 pitchers most of the year, right? And a lot, but healthy and getting better and adding things. And I think, that can be done, and it requires a lot of work, as you're describing, of tracking everything. But it can be done, and you just have to keep listening to the inputs that you're describing. So I think it was a great synopsis of that, because it's something that, I would say, if I had to say the number one thing that tomorrow, if you're a college coach, that you should integrate is just like getting your staff on board with what it means to manage workload throughout the season, because healthy is better than anything. And on the field. Yeah.
And you know what, the thing is too with it, I mean, we have a plan for basically from the beginning of, before they even step on campus, right? Like we have a map, but then what we do every week is we have our goals, but the goals are different, right? So especially now that we're in season, it's, hey, did we hit our pitch count mark last week? If not, how do we structure the following week and each day? So every day I go out, there's, from a workload standpoint, I mean, this is how big of a deal that, it really is. And sometimes I probably, I'll work with my other coaches, like, nope, sorry, the pitchers need more time. I got to get their pitch count up. This is a necessity.
Right, yeah.
And, but it does. And even if we're scrimmaging, right, and I know I need to get their pitch counts up, they usually go and they throw a phantom bullpen because I have to be mindful of workload. So I mean, again, it is, and our staff saw success with that.
Right.
And back to the development piece, I've been monitoring every week. Where's our speed at? Where's our conditioning level at? Last week was actually the first time they threw 5 straight days. So where are we at on day 5? So, I mean, it's just the development side of things is huge. So,
right. Yeah. And I think a lot of times, as why the data is important and for people to keep understand this is, wellness questionnaire, it's like subjective measurements, important. The real, like the velo, is their velo down? Because sometimes athletes, they don't know how to articulate, I'm tired, my body is tired, because they're used to pushing through everything. But if their velo is coming down, what we always say to our athletes, there's nothing wrong with that. It's input. Okay, so we know right now on day 5, your velo's down. Like, we're not able to sustain that. And so now going into the season, we can use you smarter instead of just assuming that on day 5, you're going to be the same version of yourself. And then we're all like, why'd she get hit? It's like, well, she's tired. She's not throwing her best, So I think understanding those components is just, it's crucial. It's really crucial. And it's really, really impactful to the game, and having big staffs that can be used different, and understanding sort of all of that is really exciting to watch. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Well, I really appreciate this. I'm going to wrap it there. I think we could really probably deep dive at some point into sort of this integration piece, because you guys are just doing it so brilliantly, and it's been so fun to watch. And let's see, it's 4 days from game day, 5 days.
Yeah. Friday, here we come.
Friday. Okay. Counting down. So so we'll be watching and rooting you on, and we're excited to watch you this season.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Well, S2 Nation, thanks for joining another episode of the Bet on Me podcast. Go out today, bet on yourself, and remember, when you bet on yourself, you can't lose.